Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us at this MIT Technology Review Arabia webinar today. This session is part of an ongoing collaboration between MIT Technology Review Arabia and Mohammed bin Zayed University of AI. It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Eric Zink, the president of Mohammed bin Zayed University of AI, a graduate-level research-based academic institution that offers specialized degree programs for local and international students in the field of artificial intelligence. Eric will be talking about responsible AI for the future of our societies. If you have any questions, please write them down in the chat so Eric can answer after the session, after he's done with his session. And thank you so much for joining us today, Eric, and over to you now.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'd like to begin by thanking the MIT Tech Review Arabia for giving me this opportunity to talk about responsible AI, which is a topic I always wanted to talk about. But as you can imagine, whenever I was giving a technical presentation, I was often asked about the latest algorithm, the best results so far, how you'll be the leaderboard and stuff like that. But I think responsibility of AI is equally, if not more important, even than those leaderboard performances, because it has a very huge impact on our life. Just to reflect the central theme of this event organized by MIT Tech Review, it is centered on life reimagined. So why we reimagine life, our works, reimagine our work. So obviously it is because we have now a new norm due to the pandemic, but also because it forces us to focus on and turn to new technology, such as online shopping, remote working, or even virtual companion when you are locking in your own room. So in that case, AI seems to be offering an obvious solution, to meet many of these new challenges. It feels like we're already in the era of AI, right? You are seeing already AI doing a lot of things, showing on, such as in this page. We see, AI involved in playing games. They are deployed in many public space for surveillance. They can drive robotics to do amazing, art, acrobatic work, and they can generate contents. They can also be used to discover drug structures and help with the drug designs. And the public and also the futurists do have a very ambitious and romantic aspiration for AI. It may be that the future AI will bring us to this world where the AI agent will have human-like consciousness, emotion, and everything to interact with us. That's one way of viewing the future of AI. And technologists sometimes take a different view. For example, one of the trendy things right now among the AI researchers is to build larger and larger models known as transformers, which hopefully could one day become general purpose. In fact, one way to achieve such powerness in AI or in the transformer is to make the model larger and larger. Over the past 3 years, we see a 10,000 time increase of the size of the model. Just before we even understand how the current state-of-the-art model, GPT-3, is working, Google is already talking about building a new model which is 100 times bigger, right? So this is another future. There has been a lot of speculations on the rise of AI in comparison with our human intelligence. Of course, we human beings are hopefully getting smarter and smarter, but the curve appears to be very different, right? In this particular curve proposed by some futurists, we might be seeing a singularity where the artificial intelligence could be smarter than human in as soon as 2023. Well, whether this is going to be true or not, I'm not going to enter into such a debate. As a scientist, I have my personal opinion about how to get there, at least technologically. For example, whether the transformers that we see just now is going to answer challenging questions like counterfactual reasoning, logical reasoning, or even doing collaboration among people, among agents, and building strategies and planning. These are very open scientific topics. But on the other hand, I think there are some other topics which also deserves a lot of deep thinking. aside from the scientific debates. For example, when we are building these bigger and more complex models, we should probably also be conscious that there is a risk underneath. What if such system go wrong? And what could be the scientific impacts or the social impacts or the economical impacts due to this kind of development? Right? So I'll give you some examples of how this risk and how this impact look like. For example, if you look at the industry that produce safety critical products, such as aviation industry, such as power plants, space travel, or even just vehicles on the road, you don't actually see the latest AI technology play a major role in those operations. In fact, the AI revolution is not happening in many of these businesses. And there's a reason for that. Why? Because if we look into the safety issue, it turns out that there is a misalignment of the so-called AI safety and the industrial safety that we are getting so used to. For example, when we were talking about car safety, airplane safety, nuclear power plant safety, we're talking about a result directly related to the action and the consequence of those actions. And we're looking for a number that is extremely small, such as one death or single-digit death per 1 billion miles and so forth. But in AI, when people are talking about performance and safety, it's usually related to the accuracy of a human-defined task, such as recognizing objects and so forth. And also the order of magnitude differences in number is also not to be ignored. So there is this serious alignment, which prevents the AI solutions to be readily deployed for industry. In fact, the very way that AI products are created is also very different from the industrial production. Here is an illustration. On the top, you can see how computer scientists and AI engineers are producing AI solutions. It's typically involving a lot of programming, but also tweaking and hacking in a black box-ish fashion, to the point that very often we don't actually know the details of how an algorithm is working and how data gets trained, or how model gets trained from data and so forth. So very often people say that an AI solution is a black box. But in a industrial solution, which is safety critical, the least we want to obtain is a black box, because we need to track down when necessary any possible trace of error and how error are propagated. And maybe we even want to simulate those events so that we can diagnose the deployments before they go to live. In another example, so how artificial intelligence are impacting climate changes and impacting environments. You probably all the time hear people talking about certain good practices, such as reduce your frequency of going air travel, maybe not cutting trees from the forest and stuff like that. But we rarely hear people talking about how to use the social media less frequently, how to reduce your frequency of posting in your friend circle, and how to reduce your frequency of Google search. Right? But in fact, these kind of activities can also have a pretty significant environmental footprint. For example, the AI model I just talked about, the GPT-3 model, which contains 175 billion parameters, it actually takes billions of dollars to train, and the electricity it is using can be enough to power a small city with say a few hundred thousands of homes. And if we are talking about the latest model that will be trained, which is 100 times bigger than the GPT-3, you can imagine the cost bill, both in dollar and in electricity, can be very, very big. This is just about training the model for once. What if we want to use this model and open it up for all the population to query into it? Then we're talking about billions of searches per day and billions of times the model will be invoked. That's a significant usage and energy consumption. In fact, beyond energy consumption, we also need to cool the system by water or other approaches. And there are many other aspects of the AI operation that is impact on environments. In fact, the internet is not free. The search, the tweets, the video, the emails that we are getting used to every day is already accounting for 4% of the global greenhouse emission, and it is only going to be going up higher. Right. So, but on the other hand, if we look at the research of AI today, I don't think the current definition of AI performance is very kind to the earth. Right. We actually are still focusing on accuracy, speed, good mathematical transparency, and the good human memory, and so forth, so forth. But when we are talking about the environmental impacts, we need to talk about or focus on electricity carbon impacts, cooling usages, and even capex and opex that you need to bring in to facilitate the development and deployments. So there is a need, obviously, for us to measure performance maybe differently from what we are doing now in everyday AI research. So that actually is just a few examples that I want to highlight, people's attention. These are examples of the kind of the shady aspects of AI research that are eclipsed by the glare of AI super models, such as the monster models and so forth. But it highlights the importance of rising community attention to the social, economical, and the environmental responsibility of AI. Why there is a responsibility? For example, when we are developing a model for AI, we probably should also ask whether this model is safe or even debuggable when safety issues arise. And that means the research will be focusing also on the modularity, the standardization, the reproducibility of the AI production. And also larger and more complex AI models is now already generating a significant carbon footprint. Can we talk about also measuring the performance and the value of the AI in terms of its environmental impacts? We probably also see that now the development of a state-of-the-art AI model and even the definition of the topic that we should look into are owned by a small number of AI superpowers who has the resource and the brain power of doing that. This actually makes the AI solution and also the outcome of those solutions less accessible to the general public. Therefore, there isn't a balance and also a diversity in terms of how AI should be, how AI research should be conducted and how research results should be disseminated. So there is a need to look into the accessibility of AI. But also in the end, we also need to make the AI solution affordable so that it is going to be, used and playing, delivering value to, average people rather than just become, a tool only owned by a small number of people or corporate, or nations, right? So these are the responsibility in AI I see to be really deserving, great deal of attention these days. Also, we must not forget that as an AI researcher, we are privileged on the one hand to do research and to really, push, the boundary and the frontier of AI capability. But on the other hand, I think it's important for us and also for other people involved in the AI industry to be cognizant, to be sensitive about the amount of power we are wielding in our hand. AI is a powerful technology, just like many of the other technologies, such as nuclear power, genetic engineering, and so forth. Right? All these advanced technology, alongside with their value, carries a risk. For example, these days, I think one of the major techniques we use to do personalized product recommendation is an AI algorithm. Imagine that you can use the algorithm on the one hand to understand the user's interest and deliver or suggest to him or her the best products that would make her very happy or deliver a good amount of value. But what if you have a person who is maybe in a trauma or in a suicidal phase that she was searching for a suicide method? Do you want to also follow that and give her the recommendation? well, this becomes a real risk and even an ethical issue that we need to pay attention to. At a policy and nation level, again, AI has been playing a bigger role in making highly impactful public policy decisions. For example, we can use AI in this pandemic phase to decide which vaccine to go after, and when to wear a mask, and when to open the traffic or the travel, and how many hospital beds you need to set ahead of time, to be prepared for potential outbreaks and stuff like that. And therefore, if the AI algorithm is going wrong, then we are going to put the public under big risk. So there is a responsibility, to really look deeply into, additional issues such as fairness of AI, ethical AI, trustworthiness, and explainability. In terms of fairness, if people are not well trained or informed to use the right type of data, you may end up with an algorithm which will treat different population very differently and deliver very biased and unfair results. And the AI technology itself, can be falling into the hands of the wrong people and could be even weaponized to harm people if it is not correctly, protected or regulated. Right? You can imagine AI can be used to deceive people, maybe even to generate we all know the technique called deep fake, which can generate images and text that is not from the original person. And they can also cause addiction and can help people to manipulate others, and so on and so forth. Right? So the ethical issue is a major challenge right now in AI because there hasn't been a global consensus on how to regulate and how to define the ethical principles of AI. Trustworthiness is, of course, very important. There are people out there, there are activities out there which is producing adversarial interferences of AI algorithm to maybe even confuse or deceive the AI algorithm. Therefore, when AI agent is giving you a solution or a prediction, you have to build that trust that you are confident about that. And how to achieve that is a very, very important mathematical and also engineering and also a policy issue. And finally, because of the high stake, behind many of the AI solution, we need to, also pursue for beyond a black box solution in the form of explainable AI, because to, for example, promote a policy and to, for example, administrate in a particular decision, or to provide solutions on clinical treatments and convince the patients to follow the doctor's AI, oriented or AI-driven decisions. You also need to provide a plausible explanation, of those, recommendations before you can just convince people to adopt, right? So all this again becomes a responsibility for the AI researchers beyond just pushing for bigger numbers, or faster solutions. So I can go on and on with a lot of more examples, but I want to close my talk because of little time by connecting what we just discussed with our local opportunities. As you all know, I just arrived in this country less than half a year ago, and I was amazed by the enthusiasm and also the opportunity presented to us and to myself as an AI researcher and also as a university administrator. It is estimated that the AI could contribute to more than 300 billion worth of the economy to the Middle East by the year of 2030. And that means a vast volume of responsibilities and also opportunities. It really means that UAE is to become an open ground and test bed for AI innovations. But that also means that we need to really take on these opportunities very responsibly to make sure that we do it right, both societally, economically, and environmentally responsible, so that we can serve the national strategies and priorities in multiple sectors, such as what is shown below, healthcare, energy, transportation, and smart city, fintech, and so forth, with a great deal of reliability and responsibility embedded. To achieve that vision, I think there is a need even to rethink how to do the AI research, because as I just mentioned, right now the AI research is still very much focusing on the leaderboard performance and also on benchmark data sets. My personal opinion is that this practice of AI research is still very close to the good old day ancient practice of an alchemist, where you mix materials together and you are going to sit aside and see what's happening. You don't have a real kind of transparent and causal understanding of the experiment that you are doing and also the outcome you are going to produce from these kind of experimentations. So we are not yet at a stage of a periodic table where when you combine components together using different AI algorithms and using different data, you have a predictable outcome coming out of the other end, and therefore you can start measuring and managing the opportunity and also the risk. And we are even further away from making use of this knowledge to build a production line of AI solutions where you can manufacture AI solutions in batch mode. You can basically build a single machinery, such as a machine translator, that can be in a turnkey fashion oriented towards different pairs of language translation, adjust to different dialect, and also to even adjust to different use case contexts and so forth. So all these very industrial style production of a solution, which we see, for example, in chemical engineering or in other industry, is not yet happening in AI. So there's a long way for us to go. And one of the key, I think, mission for us as AI researcher and as educator is to really find the right balance between the fundamental research and applied research so that they stay connected and they iterate and cross-improve each other. Fundamental research is very important, obviously, in AI and as in other domains, right? For example, we see the impact of fundamental research, in molecular biology, in the invention and production of the mRNA-based, COVID vaccine. And likewise, in AI, there is absolutely, a need to really invest on fundamental research. But on the other hand, if the research forever stay in the ivory tower and fail to connect to real needs in the community and in the corporates, then we are going to face into the issue I just mentioned, safety issue, environmental issue, maybe ignored just because they don't enter the equation of what a fundamental research would see how AI perform. So that's where university becomes an important hub, for all these ideas to blend and to catalyze, into the best practice. Here, we are building a new university, which is the first of its kind, dedicating to AI research and at a graduate level. Our goal is focus on these three pillars. One is, of course, the university's core mission to create knowledge. But in here, we're not talking about just knowledge for the sake of knowledge in the form of more papers or more patents. We really want to become a thought leader to think about what are the right problems and what are the right approach to work on problems, and also how the results should look like, right? So this is beyond just accumulation of all kind of knowledges. It is the actionable and the useful knowledges, and that has a real impact on our society. And in terms of capacity building, we are thinking about not just training leaders. In fact, even more importantly, we want to train builders who are cognizant and in fact proficient of AI technology and can carry this practice into whatever job they're going to take in the future to become the facilitator of AI solutions in a responsible way. And only with these two dimensions being established, we are going to be able to asking for or expecting for the ecosystem catalyzation. For example, tech transfers and commercialization and entrepreneurship and so forth. I do want to emphasize that there is this balance between creating an environment that tends to produce risk-taking curiosity and research versus a very grounded and practical attention and emphasis on the application value of the research outcome. So as a a new university, we actually are having the opportunity to experiment a lot of new ideas, and also we can start with a clean slate by not repeating the mistakes the predecessors were making, and by adopting the best practice we see anywhere in the world to really bring them to this campus, and hopefully creating a new movement of a responsible AI research. So I want to close by advocating some projects in our university. One of these projects, which is named as composable, automatic, and scalable machine learning, is one of these efforts launched at MBCUAI that is really advocating responsible and useful AI. And the way it is advocating so is to really dissect a blanket black box machine learning problem into a number of key dimensions which allow composability of big machine learning solutions using standardized, reusable, and repurposable Lego components to build from the blueprint, governed by first principles. And then it should deliver the solution in an automatic way, which can free the engineers from very energy hungry or talent intensive practice, manual training and tuning. And finally, we hope our solution using the platform can be scalable so that we can effortlessly scale and democratize the machine learning and AI product in a resource efficient manner. So I'm hoping this project provides a useful foundation and a stage for the research in AI fundamental work and the practical applications to be all unified under the theme of responsible and useful AI. And then to go from there to carry more innovations. So I welcome colleagues and researchers and students and engineers to look into this project and give us input and even join us and collaborate on many of the potential applications and opportunities. So with that, I'm going to close my talk. Thank you very much for the attention. I'm happy to take a few questions if you have any.
Thank you so much, Eric. We have actually a few minutes left for some of the questions. So I'll start with, are there organizations researching into the ethical aspects of AI?
I believe definitely AI ethics has already become a very, very hot and intensive topic that has been discussed in many of the top machine learning conferences, such as NeurIPS and ICML. And I knew that several organizations, such as Stanford University, Carnegie Mellon, MIT, all had various level of efforts organized to discuss AI ethics. But I think there's still a need to further expand the scope of this study to make it going beyond just a policy or philosophical discussion, but really make them into a scientific study, which we can use a rigorous and a quantifiable tool to define what ethics entails, what risk can be measured, can be detected, and how to translate those risks and also those ethical concerns into an algorithmic or a theoretical open question that researchers can grant their effort into and then deliver useful work.
Great. Another question is, can students join in on the new AI project created by Mohammed bin Zayed University of AI?
Oh, yes. This project is an open source software project, which is already launched in GitHub. So students are absolutely invited and welcomed, to submit your interest, to the website and join the project, either as a freelancer, or if you're already on campus, you could, identify, advisors, or collaborators, to join in various different forms.
I think that's a great opportunity for students. Another question, Eric, is there any visual tool to analyze the output produced by intermediate layers of a deep model? I want to see what features my model is concentrating on in order to produce a prediction.
That's a great question. I think you already identified a need for more work of a responsible AI, because you could often almost argue that the current way those bigger models are implemented is not very responsible yet, because you cannot visualize systematically those intermediate results. I think people right now can cherry pick in a few layers and a few internal representations after certain transformers to see some results. But these are, as I said, cherry picking. You cannot systematically find a trend and also to maybe intervene and experiment with different architectural adjustments and so forth. At least not as far as I know of. Maybe there are ways internally, but there hasn't been, a standard practice of doing so. I think that already, suggests a great need to really, pay attention to the topic of how to visualize and understand larger scale machine learning or deep learning models.
Okay, another question is, can you shed light on research grants, and do you collaborate with regional institutions?
Great question. We are actually in the process of actively soliciting and sourcing, multiple collaborators from the region and also internationally. So for now, I can already, of course, communicate that we signed a research agreement with the Weizmann Institute of Science of Israel to carry out a wide range of collaborative research in the space of AI and genomics. And also we're in the process of finalizing a similar contract with another major institution, top institution in the world, to roll out similar programs. And we actively working with the local regional universities that are our good neighbors, to discuss collaborations at multiple fronts. Our collaboration, of course, is not only at academic level, right? We are actually working with government agencies and also corporates, both in the region and around the world. At this point, of course, we are very young. We have very limited capacity to really carry, a large number of projects, but we are making the infrastructure, ready, for those collaborations. And also, I'm hoping that our students, can soon get prepared to start taking on these projects. As a matter of fact, this summer, we have a good number of first-year master's and PhD students of MBCUI already entering the internship programs of several regional, very, very prominent corporates. In fact, we have a great deal of demands, more than what we can supply. So I'm very optimistic that in a few years, MBCUI will be able to produce high quality engineers and students, taking on these opportunities.
Great. I think we have time for one more question, but I see a lot of questions related to the programs at the university. I recommend that you reach out, or if the communications team can just write down an email where attendees can ask questions directly to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to write to me. My address is president@mbcui.ac.ae. Just write to me, and my team will be taking on those questions, answer directly to you.
That's amazing. I think because the rest of the questions are more focused on programs and what students can do. So I think that's it. We've come to an end to our session. Thank you so much, Eric, for this thought-provoking talk. And
thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, everyone, also for joining us today. I hope you were inspired by what Professor Eric talked about today.